Day 3 of testing at the Combine is in the books. We got to take a look at the quarterbacks, wide receivers, and tight ends. Let's take a look at today's winners and losers. Welcome to Jets Talk. My name's Ryan. I'll be your pilot. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button. If you've been here before, welcome back. I love having you here. Boys and girls, we are talking day 3 of the Combine. I've gone over days 1 and 2. I'll link those down below in the description if you want to check those out. Today, we are talking about the quarterbacks, wide receivers, tight ends, some winners and losers from the day that I thought were kind of interesting and we should keep an eye on them. So without further ado, let's jump right into it. We're going to go over to the wide receivers first, and this is a group of receivers that I'll admit is a little underwhelming for me. Quentin Johnson is perceived to be the top wide receiver based on size. He's, taller, 6'4". A lot of the star or bigger wide receivers that are coming out, so I shouldn't say bigger. A lot of the bigger name wide receivers that are coming out this year are much shorter. They're all under that 6'1" threshold. Jordan Addison out of USC is under that. Jackson Smith-Njigba, Zay Flowers, Josh Downs, and Jalen Hyatt all measured under that 6'1" mark. So something to kind of keep an eye on from a height perspective. Now, as far as the testing goes, I'm kind of underwhelmed by the majority of the receivers in this class. I'm not going to lie. This is something that I've been kind of mulling back and forth as far as what should the Jets do at wide receiver. And I'm looking at Corey Davis, I'm looking at Braxton Berrios, and I'm seeing, well, they may or may not be on the team next year for cap savings purposes. And could the Jets go with a receiver in the draft? And based on the numbers that I'm kind of seeing here and kind of looking at some of the tape that I've looked at in the past, I'm not loving a lot of the receivers here. And that's not to say that they can't be really good. Smith-Njigba is getting a lot of hype for his quickness in and out of breaks. I can understand if the Jets were to go that route. I feel like he could be someone that might be comparable to a Corey Davis replacement. But from the explosion side of things, he's just not as explosive as I really want to see. To me, I'm hoping for maybe a different profile of pass catcher, whether that be a receiver or a tight end, someone with a bigger body. So Quentin Johnson kind of was the frame that I was kind of looking for, but he's kind of been knocked for his blocking at times, and he's a little bit softer than you would like for maybe a really tall wide receiver. So I don't know. Quentin Johnson and the top of this receiver class, I'm not too thrilled at it. The top receiver wound up running 4.33, which, I mean, when you have a linebacker in Nolan Smith running 4.39 as the top linebacker, it kind of puts a little bit into perspective just how odd this receiving class seems to be. And we just didn't see a crazy ton of speed like we have in the past. But moving on from that, I wanted to highlight a player, and that's Jalen Hyatt, a receiver that I hadn't really looked too closely at, but he tested pretty high in a lot of the categories here. And I would, if there was someone of the top receivers that I'd want to look at, I think Hyatt's interesting enough. Again, he's probably going to go top of the second, which is not ideally where I'd want to take a receiver. I'm looking I want the best one in the class if there's clearly a best one, or maybe a good value one. But I don't know if I necessarily see that based on where the Jets' needs currently sit right now. So as far as receivers go, I'm probably out on the receiver front in terms of the draft until maybe late in the draft if there's some kind of late round gem that people are looking at. Now, to kind of juxtapose that, the tight end class, very impressive. Really good tight end class. I know the Jets have CJ Uzomah and Tyler Conklin, and we just drafted Jeremy Ruckert last year. But if I had to take a crack at a pass catcher this year, I would 100% prefer it to be at tight end than wide receiver. And that might be kind of weird, but I'm sort of thinking in the mindset of a big tight end is a young quarterback's best friend, and a veteran maybe presence in wide receiver might be more beneficial for a Carr or a Rodgers signing than maybe a younger wide receiver. I don't know. That's more of a subjective thing, I think, than anything else. But Darnell Washington for the tight ends, this guy is enormous. He was the dude we saw at the Senior Bowl that had a 90-inch wingspan or something crazy. He had the most electric catch at the Combine, the one-handed snag near the sidelines. This guy's going to get a lot of looks. And there's actually been some talk about him maybe converting to tackle in the NFL, which kind of changes the thought process in how you may view Darnell Washington. If you're a Jet fan, maybe there's a situation where you're I don't really love any of the players that are up at 13. Maybe we solve tackle in some capacity in free agency. Maybe you slide back and you're kind of eyeballing Darnell Washington because you say, oh, you know what? He can block really well. He's one of the best blockers in this draft. We have a really good running team. We could use a little tackle help on the outside. Maybe someone with a massive frame isn't the worst sort of decision. Really high profile. And look, his metrics aren't, crazy out of the box as far as like the testing goes. 31-inch vertical, not very, high, but he's an incredibly tall guy. How much higher is he really going to have to jump? So kind of some stuff to look at here. I really like Darnell Washington a lot. Now, on the other side of that coin, I think some guys that may have hurt their draft stock, not necessarily because they're bad, but Michael Mayer and Dalton Kincaid are two tight ends where, Mayer didn't necessarily test great. He wasn't expected to test like outlandishly good or anything like that. And Dalton Kincaid just did not participate because he's perceived to be tight end 1 or tight end 2. So that's where these two guys are kind of looking. I'm not necessarily down on either of these two guys. I'd be fine with either one of the tight ends, but I think because of the rest of the class performing the way they did, in a sort of weird roundabout way, they kind of lowered their draft stock. And maybe that's an odd way to look at it, but tight end class, it's pretty exciting. I would definitely be looking at some of these guys here because I think the tight end option for next year, like I don't know if Conklin or Uzomah is going to be here in 2024, and that, to me, if it leaves us with just Ruckert, who hasn't really seen any reps, I don't feel confident enough in Ruckert at this point to have him be like the sole tight end on the roster. So investing a premium pick in one isn't necessarily crazy because then you can just roll forward with that guy and Ruckert as your tight end bookends on both sides. And both guys would be able to conceivably block really well and catch passes out of the information and whatnot. So tight ends, I'm okay with the tight end draft prospects here. I'm good on that. I would totally draft one. Now, as far as quarterback prospects, there was like a lot of stories, but the two biggest stories I would say are Bryce Young out of Alabama and Anthony Richardson out of Florida for two different reasons. Anthony Richardson, absolutely monster metrics. This guy is like compared to Cam Newton in terms of like his metrics, only he's even faster. This guy is so electric. I think he's actually going to be the #1 pick taken. I really do. I don't know if it's going to be the Bears or if the Bears trade out of that pick. Personally, I would love to see him go to Seattle. I think him in Seattle, sitting behind Geno Smith for like 2 or 3 years, might be a great situation for him. There's no pressure to start him right off the bat. But I think the athletic profile upside is just so astronomically high that Seattle can take that risk of going for that caliber of a prospect while still having Geno Smith, who could be your quarterback for a little bit. So when you're looking at the draft, I know it's nice to go with maybe some safer options, but Richardson is just so explosive and such a freak of an athlete. You trust your coaches to maybe develop that guy a little bit further. Now, on the other side of that coin, you have Bryce Young, who came in and tested really small as far as his metrics go. 5'10", one of the shortest quarterbacks to come into the league. Kyler Murray, I think, is a slight tick shorter or a slight tick lighter. Whatever it was, Kyler Murray was just a teeny bit smaller than what Bryce Young was. I don't know. Look, size-wise, everyone gives Zach crap for like being a shorter-ish appearing quarterback, but I think that's more of his slim stature. He's standing at 6'2", and we are giving him problems about his height. 5'10", you have linemen that are like 6'7" and above. Like they're some big offensive linemen. Are you going to be able to see over those offensive linemen at the next level? Now, at Alabama, you're going to have NFL caliber offensive linemen playing in front of you. So the argument could be made, he's already played with those guys. It's not so much a problem right now, but he's also, not necessarily going against the defenses that he'd be going against in the NFL. I don't know. Bryce Young, clearly the best quarterback from performance on the field, but definitely risky in terms of, out of the box size. Like there's certain metrics that you want to always hit at certain positions. And Bryce Young is definitely an outlier in terms of, number of quarterbacks sub 6 foot in the NFL. Now, as far as the other quarterbacks that tested or that measured in, C.J. Stroud, 6'3", Will Levis, 6'4", Hooker, 6'3", who we actually found out is going to be able to start the season, I think. I don't know if he's ready for training camp or ready for week 1, but he tore his ACL middle of the season, end of the season. So the fact that he's on track to come back is really impressive. And then Tanner McKee, he's an interesting prospect. He was one of the top guys out of high school, but he never really put it together at Stanford, and he's a monster as far as his size goes. 6'6", 231. If he could be had in the middle of the draft, he's someone I would look at for a backup quarterback. There's enough upside there, and if you could get him in like the 3rd or 4th round, if that's where he wound up going, I thought he was going to go in the 2nd round. So maybe I'm totally off base on this, but I feel like he's got at least some size metrics that you can, maybe feel comfortable from a prototypical quarterback standpoint. Interesting stuff. The quarterback market is going to be interesting for this year because we're hoping that like 4 go in the top 10. 10 going in the top 10 would be fantastic. Anthony Richardson, like I said, guy tested out of the gym. Top metrics in broad jump, vert, and 40-yard dash. Now, I would have loved to have seen what Lamar Jackson would have run the 40 in. Now, I believe Cam Newton has was it the fastest 40 or the second fastest 40? I don't know if he broke the record for the 40. I could be off on this. But either way, this guy is testing incredibly well. Like metrics that you do not see in the NFL, and a special caliber athlete. And he doesn't have, it seems like he's a good guy too. Like from all the interviews that I've watched and from like the book side of things or like the maybe football IQ side of things, this guy seems to have it. He just doesn't have a ton of experience at the quarterback position. Someone sitting him for a little bit, like I said, behind maybe a Geno Smith, or maybe if the Raiders wanted to trade up and, maybe McDaniels wanted him to be his passion project and maybe Jimmy Garoppolo is the guy for the next 2 or 3 years. I think that could work out. I would not want to see Anthony Richardson thrown into just any system. I do think it's going to be similar to a Lamar Jackson situation where you're going to have to build the offense around him to cater to his strengths now while he learns the NFL game at the NFL level and learns how to read defenses and maybe evolve in that capacity. I mean, the way the NFL is trending, you look at Jalen Hurts, you look at someone like Josh Allen and all these quarterbacks that are having a lot of success. You gotta be mobile, and this guy is the most mobilest of guys. I mean, just electric athlete. His highlight tape is nothing short of incredible. Now, on that other side of things, Bryce Young, as far as like his size was not great when he measured in, but him not testing, I thought was a little bit not great for his draft stock. Like the interview process when you're the top quarterback is the most important. You don't have to put anything on tape that may otherwise ding your draft stock. But as far as like seeing him compete against other guys, like we're going to see Bryce Young throw at his pro day. He didn't even throw during the competition, during the drills at the combine. So you're not seeing him under the same conditions as everyone else, and he's going to have a perfectly scripted offense or game plan that he's going to be doing at his pro day. I don't love when quarterbacks don't throw at the combine. It doesn't mean a whole heck of a lot, but maybe there's a situation because of how you saw C.J. Stroud throw. He looked really impressive. I thought Stroud looked the most impressive of all the quarterbacks from like an accuracy, deep ball sort of standpoint. So I could see a situation where someone like gambles on an Anthony Richardson up high. I could see someone taking the prototypical size of a C.J. Stroud. And then I could see people being concerned a little bit about Bryce Young. I mean, I could see him going to the Texans, or I could see him sliding a little bit further down to like, just past number 5 maybe. It's interesting. I do think there's definitely going to be 4 quarterbacks taken in the top 10, which definitely helps the New York Jets sitting at number 13. The more quarterbacks or more positions that the Jets are probably not targeting that could go in front of us is going to push better players on our draft board down to us. So I really like this. I think it's really interesting to see the receivers, tight ends, and quarterbacks here. I personally really like the tight end class. I would like to take a crack at one at some point. It doesn't have to be in the first round. Guys, let me know your thoughts on the quarterbacks, wide receivers, tight ends. Was there a particular player that you really liked? Was there someone that you'd like us to stay away from? Let me know in the comment section down below. And as always, go Jets.